Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? I was going to talk about Witch EI and announce my next couple of videos about that book and on that subject, but I just got news from Nerd Cookies. I will put her video in the description that the Project Hail Mary movie adaptation is moving forward. It might even get bumped up from its release date from next summer. And I realized I've never done a review video about that one. I reviewed it on Upstream about 4 years ago when it came out, and geez, holy crap, like when did I get to the point where I've been doing reviews on Upstream for 4 years? But I digress. If you've never read it, I highly recommend it. It's written by Andy Weir, the same guy who did The Martian, which is a book that I completely just fell in love with when I first read it in 2014. I've already read it a couple of times since then, even bought the hardcover, the nice hardcover to read to my wife. She really loved that book too. Project Hail Mary was kind of his third book. Like, he'd written a whole bunch of other stuff, but this was like his third space-bound hard sci-fi. The Martian just blew everybody's mind. He followed it up with a book called Artemis that was not anywhere near as good. It was really cool on the science side of things, and keep in mind, I can't vouch for or detract from any of the hard science facts in it. I just got to assume that he knows what he's talking about. The science side of it was really cool. The characters were all crap. In fact, that book ended up getting the 372 pages treatment from Mike Nelson and Connor Listoka. They made that one of their target books for that podcast, and they were right to, we'll say. So when Project Hail Mary got announced, I was like, okay, is this going to be more like The Martian or more like Artemis? No, it's definitely more like The Martian. I'm going to be a little bit vague in describing certain things just because this is a book that deals very well with layered revelations and plot twists, and it's all kind of centered on the fact that the main character wakes up in space with progressive amnesia, or I guess you would say regressive amnesia. Like, he wakes up, he remembers a couple of things, and he's slowly getting his memories back. Now, generally, I hate amnesia as a storytelling device, but that's because I feel like most of the time when I run into it, it's you get several books into a series, and then the author is out of ideas, so he just whacks his main character on the head, and you revert back to like 3 books ago in terms of the character's arc. No, what's going on here is more of like the thing that you've seen in serialized television over the last 20 years, where you start in the present, and then you'll have kind of a flashback to the past, and then you yo-yo back and forth between the two timelines. And it's not necessarily cliched or overdone, it's just done a lot, but that's because it's done well. In this sense, now that we're a couple of minutes into the review here, our main character is a guy named Ryland Grace, and he's a school teacher, but he's also an astrophysicist, and he gets put into space to go solve this cosmic problem along with a team of other scientists. They've got to travel to a nearby star formation because something is happening in the cosmos. There is a phenomenon that is killing the sun. And if they don't figure this thing out, then, hey, they call it a Hail Mary for a reason. This 1 in a million shot. If they don't figure it out, then the sun dies, and so does all life in the solar system. And unfortunately, they've got to travel quite a bit of distance to get there, and this is going to require all the scientists on the ship to go into cryosleep. I don't remember exactly how many there are. It's like 3 or 4. And when they wake up, they won't immediately have all of their memories back. And so, in addition to Ryland having to deal with the side effects of this still somewhat experimental cryosleep technology, he's also got to remember A, who he is, B, why he's there, C, what he's doing, and D, how to do it. And there are even a couple of hiccups where as he A, remembers the mission, and B, the how-to of it, other memories start coming back to the surface, and that's where the whole plot twist and revelation bit comes in, and it really throws the story sideways. I would say there were half a dozen moments throughout this book where it's you could just start to think that it was over, or that you've got a grasp on what's going on, and then another leg sweep comes up, and it doesn't jar you, or, well, jarring is the wrong term. Like it doesn't come out of nowhere or out of left field. Like it's not a hack way of doing it. It's just like, oh, this is what's really been going on all along. Oh crap, this is what they've got to solve next, and there you are. I will also say, like in addition to that working extremely well, there's a first contact situation here because hey, it's a big solar system. Well, our sun is. It's a big galaxy, and the problem that they're having is not just affecting our solar system. There's an alien race that's having the same problem, and they get to this destination at the same time. And this isn't Star Trek. You don't just push a button and hit the universal translator. Ryland has to make contact with an alien race, and then he has to figure out how to talk to them. They are extremely physiologically different from humans. And he's got to narrow it down to, okay, what are our commonalities, and what tools do I have to breach those commonalities, or to bridge those commonalities and build some kind of language that I can use so that I can talk to these people and we can work together to solve this problem. This is a great example of like a big, hard sci-fi that's trying to tackle a couple of different problems that are all layered on top of each other and connected to each other, and it does so very, very well. And it was, man, like my concern with The Martian after The Martian was done was I'd like to read more from this guy, but a book like this would be an extremely hard act to follow without just basically repeating it or rehashing it. And hey, he tried it with Artemis, and he missed on several levels with that one, but he regrouped and came back at this one and found like a new concept, a new story idea, and put his hard science knowledge to work to write something extremely compelling and fascinating. I was going to do a video about The Martian because a couple of weeks ago, science fiction author John Ringo, who I guess also has some like actual science background and knowledge, went off on that book because apparently like only half the science in it is accurate, and the other half is contrary to things that were known at the time and would have presented dire problems for the situation that Andy Weir was writing. The entire conceit of The Martian is what would happen if there was an astronaut stranded on Mars and he only had, let's say technology that's 5 minutes into the future, and he had to farm and he had to get water and air and all that. Like it started out as that kind of thought experiment. That being the case, you've got to be able to convince the readers that this guy can grow potatoes in fertilized Martian soil, and then use various Ares components to get back out into space for when like his old crew comes by to pick him up, blah, blah, blah. There were numerous issues with that apparently, and going off of what John Ringo said, one of the biggest ones is that Martian soil is full of, I believe it was perchlorate, which is poisonous, and it would have poisoned the food that he was growing and eating. And like this is the part that John emphasizes is that was known at the time. There are also major problems with the power source, the heat source that he was using. I believe it was called the TRG. There was basically like a radioactive rock that the shuttle used for something or other to get to Mars, and then their mission was to like take this thing and go bury it out in the desert with a flag on it, and he needed it because it was a viable heat source for something or other. And he goes, he would pick this thing up, and then like 20 minutes later he'd be barfing up liquefied organs. He's sitting on top of a radioactive rock. I was like, okay, I don't know this kind of stuff. I'm just going to have to take Ringo at his word the same way that I was taking Andy Weir at his word when I was reading that book, blah, blah, blah. All of this is to say that there is still hard science in Project Hail Mary, and it's an extremely like technical book, but assuming you're taking all of that at face value, it's a more substantial sci-fi that also has things like threats to the entire galaxy and an alien race, and how would you communicate with them. It's a higher and more challenging type of sci-fi, but Weir is able to take all of that and make it extremely readable to the average person. It's not like it's being written by a NASA engineer that's beating you over the head with tech specs to the uttermost farthing. that stuff is in there, but it's written and delivered at the pace of a thriller, with a couple of asides here and there about this technology does this, or this methodology yields that. It flows tremendously well. I remember when I read it, it had that quality of a book that I wanted to keep listening to it. I wanted to keep getting back to it. I didn't want to get distracted, and I pretty much mainlined it. It wasn't like, okay, I'll read a little bit here and then I'll do something else for a couple of days and then I'll get back to it and take my time. This book wanted me to read it, and I had a great time doing it. I'm thrilled to hear that it's getting a film adaptation. I'm thrilled to hear that Ryan Gosling is in it. He's a great working actor, even with all of the memes aside. I've decided I'm going to read. They've renamed the book Blade Runner by Philip K. Dick, but that's what the movie was called in the 80s. The original book title was Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? I'm going to read Blade Runner. Don't at me, bro, but I've never seen the movies. I just never got around to it. There's a lot of those like sci-fi movies that I know the general gist of them, but I've never gotten around to seeing them, and I'm keen to do that. I've heard Ryan Gosling was really, really good in Blade Runner 2049, and so I want to catch up on some of his films that I haven't seen yet. Still thinking about how much fun Fall Guy was, and even though I didn't much care for Crazy Stupid Love, his character and his performance in it were the highlight of the film. So he's a great choice to play a character like this Ryland Grace character. He's not the actor that I would have chosen from what I remember from the book. I would have picked somebody more like a Chris Pratt type, or even maybe somebody who's not so freaking chiseled and has abs and whatever. Like, you need somebody who's got a little bit of comedic chops and charm, but not necessarily somebody who's so Chadley. Ryland Grace wasn't that kind of character. He was not an out and out winner. I never got the vibe from him that this was a dude who could just like pick up chicks and not have any troubles in that department. He was a nerdy scientist. He wasn't like a flabby, slobby loser or anything. But nevertheless, I mean, you get butts in seats by putting Ryan Gosling in your movie. That's just scientific fact. Unless it's Fall Guy, but that got nobody's butts in seats. Not his fault. Anyway, all of this is a roundabout way of saying, go read Project Hail Mary. Final note, if you were at all worried about the language content in The Martian, I think there might be like one or two F-bombs in Project Hail Mary, and that's pretty much it. Other than that, it's like, I think it was just because there was one moment of major emotional distress and Ryland Grace had an outburst, which just goes to show that it's one more way that Weir was putting effort into writing a different character. Like, even though Mark Watney from The Martian and Ryland Grace from Project Hail Mary are both astronaut scientist type guys, like, they don't have all the same life experiences and everything, and that's reflected in the way that they talk and communicate and all that stuff. So it works well on that front. Anyway, ringing endorsement, 5 stars. Go read Project Hail Mary so that when the movie comes out, you can flex on your friends, the filthy casuals. Drive safe. See you out there.